How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. I'm Sam Holcman, and the topic for today is what is the training data that these artificial intelligence engines are actually being trained on? Because, of course, the fuel for these AI engines is data of some kind. And, of course, it's on the internet, and there's all sorts of things that are out there. The issue that we see here is, from what we can tell, there is no available source that says, here's what this particular brand of AI, this particular vendor, is being trained on. What are they using? And this is an issue. The inner workings of these language models, these large language models, really is what makes the answers that you're seeing relevant. It's a database. And as the old phrase goes, garbage in, garbage out, biased in, biased out, horribly put together data, horribly put together answers are what comes out. So the creators of these things are telling us, in some cases, which is kind of scary, it's proprietary. Well, is that proprietary because it is copyrighted information that is being used? Is it lift and shift? In other words, they're just scanning books and text and things like that and using that, which would also violate things. Or is there some creative scraping going on of some kind? So all of these things are actually kind of scary. If these artificial intelligence data structures are just copying or memorizing what's out there, then there's some big concerns for a number of reasons. Now, forget about for just a moment the proprietary nature of the information they're using and the lack of compensation for the people that are actually developing these things. But what is the base? In other words, is it textual information based on science fiction books? Is it based on encyclopedias that are out there? Is it based on things that were considered to be inappropriate or incorrect? Is it fiction? Is it science fiction? Is it nonfiction? Those types of things that are concerning us, as we see it. We have to recognize that this reading list, this grabbing list that's going on there, it's more than something of academic interest. The artificial intelligence engines are not intelligent. They don't invent facts. They're just putting patterns together. So if the patterns are incorrect or patterns are biased, that's what you're going to get out. And of course, we have to consider the copyright issues of those underlying sources, and we already know that there's a number of lawsuits going on to try to memorize that. And are these artificial intelligence engines putting together thought processes? In other words, are they transforming the materials from one state to another, or are they just vomiting or regurgitating, as some people call it, the information that's there? Which, of course, would be an issue depending on what the sources of that information are. So, is it scraping data? And, of course, what is represented? Is some things overrepresented? Some things underrepresented? What's the sampling approach? Did they use a concept of design of experiments to make sure that the data that is being captured has no bias in it? In other words, it's coming not from a certain source that's there. And so what's ever out on the internet right now that's being used for these things is not based on any science. It's just the internet filled it with things that are going on out there. And of course, we can imagine that there's bias. And of course, that bias builds upon itself. In other words, the bias creates more bias, which creates more bias. And sometimes more volume of data is actually, a problem. And it can say things, in other words, the chatbots and the artificial intelligence that can actually multiply the untruths that are out there. So there's lots of things that we consider. The basic situation is this: public data, whether it's copyrighted or proprietary or not, the engines of the artificial intelligence world are based on data. Not knowing what that data is and what the stratification of this should be a concern to all of us. So once again, we're in the infancies of this particular thing, but we can also see some of the dangers. On the positive side, maybe we need to look at the artificial intelligence engine as just that and look at different ways to source the data to make that engine more powerful for organizations like yourself. Think about that. Until next time, stay well, stay healthy. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.